Hi there, welcome to my channel and welcome to part 2 of Beach Life with Bob Pancakes. When we left off last time, Bob had divorced Eliza and moved to Sulani to pursue the beach life aspiration. He had achieved the first two parts of the aspiration, which was to get a suntan and eat a coconut. So the next part of this first stage of the aspiration is for Bob to get a gold at a kava party event. So Bob, in this episode, will be making some friends and making preparations to host his own kava party and hopefully score a gold. Let's see how he does. Bob continued in his efforts to make friends on Sulani and met a new sim who he even found he had something in common with. For this sim, just like Bob, was a gloomy sim. Meeting a fellow gloomy sim gave Bob hope that perhaps he could find some more friends here on Sulani and host a successful kava party after all. Bob made friends talking about food. As a foodie and a professional chef, Bob had landed on his feet because the people in Sulani were very enthusiastic about cooking, so he found that talking about food and talking about cooking was an easy way to make fast friends. To help prepare for his upcoming social event, Bob set up his own island-themed bar on his rear deck and practiced making drinks. Luckily, practicing mixology skill was something that Bob needed to do as part of his job anyway, and it was something that he really enjoyed. He was starting to really enjoy the beach life. Bob found other ways to pass the time as well in his new home. He started growing some local plants in his front beach garden area, and he took up some other hobbies, some that he hoped might lead to some self-improvement. When it came to inviting friends along for his kava party, Bob realised he maybe didn't know as many people as he thought he did. He invited all the local people that he knew and one other person he had met in Willow Creek, and he hoped that with just the 5 of them, it would be a nice, intimate event, and it wouldn't be too stressful for a loner sim like himself. Once the party got underway, Bob shortly learned that on Sulani things happened a little differently than they did in Willow Creek. On Willow Creek, you could host a social event, invite a selection of your friends and they would attend. But on Sulani, you could invite a selection of your friends and just anyone who happened to be passing by would turn up, and before long, your house would be full of people you didn't even know. As Bob prepared the kava, he hoped he would get a chance to speak to the librarian from Willow Creek he had invited along. He had taken quite a liking to her and hoped that he could use the party as a chance to get to know her a little better. But as he was serving the drink, it turned out one of his uninvited guests, who had just rocked up to the house, introduced himself to the librarian behind Bob's back and struck up the start of a romantic relationship with her. As more and more uninvited guests began to turn up, and Bob struggled to keep track of what was happening, he found himself nearing the end of his party event and sitting just at a silver. He was so close, but unfortunately not close enough, as the event ended just before Bob could reach a gold, which only meant one thing: Bob would have to host another kava party. Although Bob's kava party hadn't been quite the big success he had hoped for, he was still quite happy with the outcome, and he was actually quite excited at the opportunity to hold another party. Or maybe not, because he doesn't like people. And so Bob set out again to host another kava party. He sort of wondered why there was any point in having an invitation list if just anyone was going to turn up anyway. However, he proceeded and hoped for the best this time around. Determined to enjoy himself a little better this time around, Bob took the time to enjoy some of the kava himself. He felt like the last time the party had just rushed by him and he'd hardly had a chance to really socialise with the other Sims or really enjoy himself. This time he determined to rectify that mistake. The kava was delicious, the atmosphere was wonderful, and Bob was... It seemed like Bob had had a little too much kava this time around. Somehow, despite being dazed on kava throughout his second kava party, Bob managed to achieve gold on his kava party event, which put him into the next part of the beach life aspiration, the sand sifter part of the beach life aspiration, which was to find things through beach combing and to grill, barbecue or roast food 5 times, which would be easy for a sim like Bob. Beach combing was an activity he could do on his own, and as he already enjoyed cooking, it wouldn't take long for him to master roasting, grilling, or barbecuing outdoors. Living this new life in Sulani, Bob was starting to see some positive changes in his life. He was excelling at many of the new hobbies he had taken up. Bob continued with the next steps of his aspiration, which included beachcombing. Bob had to successfully complete this 10 times, and he found that beachcombing brought mixed results. Bob was continuing to make headway with his aspiration and make new discoveries about himself.
Oh! Ah, kadap!
As he completed his beachcombing activities, Bob had some positive experiences and some not so positive experiences. Some that were frightening, some that were stressful, and some that just made him angry.
No! Sab now.
And some that seemed to happen a little too often to make much sense. However, Bob was finding that his new aspiration was encouraging him to grow as a person, learn to enjoy life more, make new friends, and enjoy new experiences. Some of the Sulani ways that had seemed odd to Bob at first were starting to become sources of genuine enjoyment for him.
I know!
And Bob had found reasons not only to smile, but to dance. But that said, Bob still had a little bit to learn and a little way to go to continue his growth. In order to fully embrace these changes, Bob thought to himself that perhaps it was time for a little bit of a makeover so that his outer self could better reflect the changes in his inner self.
Yikla! Banaj? Whew.
With these new physical changes in place, Bob finally marked off another point of his aspiration by completing the beachcombing. Bob wasn't just experiencing his new life and aspirations in Sulani, he was also trying to learn and experience some other new things, including taking visits to the city of San Myshuno to learn about new culinary dishes he could cook himself at home, and also to expand his horizons and meet some new Sims. Bob met a young woman named Penny Pizzazz, who he found he made a good connection with. As they chatted away, they found they had, surprisingly, quite a lot in common. As they chatted away, Bob tried to ignore the fact that Sims kept spawning wearing exactly the same outfit for no apparent reason. Bob and Penny bonded over lying in the filthy city streets and watching the clouds overhead. Penny had spoken about how she was a busy and ambitious Sim, so busy apparently that in the time it took Bob to go to the toilet, she had disappeared. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to try out karaoke with her, as he had wanted to. With nothing else to do in the city, Bob then decided to head home. However, when he arrived home, he found an unexpected surprise waiting there for him. Much to Bob's surprise, when he arrived home,
Melanie!
Penny Pizzazz was there waiting for him.
Yibs.
The surprise was not an unpleasant one. Bob was quite happy to see Penny there.
Oh, Georgiuk.
Spony.
After watching the clouds together, it appeared they had actually become quite good friends.
Floopy.
Oh, you've to me!
Bob even felt comfortable enough with Penny to invite her into his home and show off his mixology skills by making up her favourite drink for her. After Penny's visit, Bob decided it was time to get going with the next part of his aspiration, which was to learn to cook outside. And what better way than to employ one of the traditional Sulani methods of cooking? When Bob woke up the next morning, he came to the revelation that in life he had no regrets.
Larko! Oh. Gleb.
Well, no regrets except maybe for the mess that he left in the toilet that morning.
Oh, what a sheesh.
But Bob soldiered on and continued cooking outdoors and continued enjoying some of his new hobbies in his new life in Sulani. Bob even felt brave enough to finally try something he had tried before and not quite managed. Bob decided he would take a ride around in the beautiful waters of Sulani in his aquazip. And, as it turned out, this time around, Bob was ready for the challenge of riding an aquazip. Not only was he ready for the challenge, but he excelled at it and found that actually riding an aquazip was a lot of fun. Bob really felt like he was making good progress, both in his new life in Sulani and in his new beach life aspiration. He could see changes in himself as a person and in the mirror. Although some things didn't change, Bob still did enjoy some of his old habits. And as he rounded off that next part of his aspiration, Bob wondered what laid ahead of him on the next step of his journey to complete the beach life aspiration. That's it for part 2 of Bob's beach life aspiration. Thanks again for watching, and tune in next time to find out what happens in part 3 as Bob continues on his journey.
Largo!